You are now being joined by the partner and head management consultant at KPMG, BC Lamikora. Thank you so much, BC, for joining us. Now, I was talking to you, Bode, about looking at some key findings from the retail and the SME side, but I want to also focus on the corporate side. It looks like they are more actually concerned about the fact that the banks should be more interested or should have a very good understanding of what their business is, what they do. Now, for you, what struck you the most about in terms of their own sentiments towards their banks?
Okay. I think for the corporate side, and some of this we need to put in context because it's 5-6 years that we have been doing the survey, and the message which we always tell the banks is that what's coming back from the customers is extremely consistent over the years, and the knowledge of their business is extremely important, which is what you've alluded to. The understanding of, so if you're talking to a telecom company, and I just use that as an example, or you're talking to Channels, and Channels is in the media space, Channels would expect you to understand their business, because as you then provide the products and services, you can then tailor them and make it appropriate to what is the requirement of Channels. I think the other thing that's key that we saw this year from the corporates is the corporates are saying prompt attention and response time for inquiries is actually the most important factor. So if we look at it from a factor perspective, which we rate over 1 to 100, prompt attention to inquiries and response time is 95.2. So that's extremely in terms of responsiveness. Now, you can only be responsive if you know the answers. So again, it goes back to understanding their business, understanding what they require, and then being able to get back in a comprehensive and holistic manner to
when we say understanding the business, would that be based on the fact that there had been regular contact with the company in question, or is it for those who are just approaching Channels, for instance, and we expect that does the corporate expect that even though you're coming for the first or second time, still trying to convince us to be your customers, is that also expected of them?
Well, let me put it this way, and I think the simplest way to put it is the way a customer had put it to us. A customer said I could have X number of banks, waiting in the waiting room, and I'm just using these analogies to make it extremely graphic. And there are people in the waiting room who I have a very good relationship with. So take Bode, my colleague. I have an extremely good relationship. She calls me all the time. Her response time is fantastic. But I then have something complex that I need to work on. What I then do is I look in the waiting room, and the person I call into the room is not necessarily Bode that comes to me all the time. It's the person who can understand those needs and then translate it into solving my financial problem. So therefore, it just goes back again to say, yes, being in contact, having the right relationship is important, but the right relationship has to be built on the right foundation. It's not a relationship of I like you. It's a relationship that you can add value to my business. That's extremely important.
Of who actually delivers.
Yeah. Well, adding value to the business. Okay. So then who delivers is on top of that. But adding value to the business, I can only add value to you if I understand your business, I understand what the issues are. If not, we're friends. But when you have your back to the wall, it won't be friendship that will be the call. The call would be who can help me solve the problem I have at that particular time.
Now, what was it 4 or 5 years ago when you started this particular survey for the corporates? Was it?
It was still. The issues have not changed in terms of prompt attention, in terms of knowledge of business. It's the same thing, and we tell the banks now that the feedback is consistent. So really, it means we're getting to the heart of what is key to the corporate. So the feedback hasn't changed. You may have some slight variance depending on what the year is, but the core of it, in terms of knowledge of business, response time, in terms of accessibility, remains the same. Now, the trend that we would notice that's a bit new, that's coming up, is just given the change in the payment landscape. So solutions that fit that have become more important. So if you look at some of the gaps and the products and services that are important to the corporates, the products and services around e-payments, around e-collections. As you know, the central bank is going for a cashless drive,
policy, yeah.
and that cashless policy is changing the way people will relate to their bank. So those things have become important. The ability to be able to do access my bank on the internet is extremely important to the corporate. So I think it's the level of importance of those alternate channels that we can then see an increased trend in the recent years.
Okay, well, we then think that the corporate customers who are more interested in using that particular channel. But leave that. I was also looking at it. You said over 70% of the corporate customers would actually recommend their banks to. I mean, obviously, these banks they must be doing something right.
Sure.
So obviously, so this.
Sure.
But let me come to you. Of course, banks always try to get quite personal with their customers. And I was looking at the part of the report that says some banks actually use the Facebook, social media handles, Facebook, Twitter, but only 91%. Only 9% of them actually use that. I guess that's for the retail customers. Only 9% of them actually go to the Facebook page of some of those banks to. I don't know if there's any transaction that's done there, but part of their relationship. Why do you think that's so?
Okay. What we did this year was this was the first year we were actually asking the question that do you use social media? And then we now ask them that if you use social media, how many of you do you actually use it, to contact your bank? Do you know your bank has a page where they used to advertise their products, and only 9% of them actually say that they actually go to these banks, to look at them. If I break down that result, if you now look at that segment I was talking about earlier, the 18 to 30 segment in terms of the younger ones, we found out that about 40% of them actually use the social media. They actually visit the sites. The younger generation actually use it. But the interesting thing is they're saying, it's not like I want my bank to even, contact me directly. But, if they have anything to advertise, if they want to tell me about their product, if they want to tell me about new launch, if they want to tell me about new things that are happening in their bank, fine. That's fine for me in terms of my interaction with the bank.
The bank will be more effective using that channel, Twitter or Facebook, to announce some of the new product or service.
Yes, promotions, in general.
BC, we've been talking about satisfied customers. Let's talk about customers that have not been, that are not satisfied. Those who would leave the bank or their banks for a particular reason. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I think there are a number of issues. If you take some of the corporate customers, some of the feedback is around pricing, pricing in terms of the competitiveness of the rates at which interest rates which they're getting from the bank. But we also need to put that in context, because you then ask a direct question, why would you leave? But if you then put it in the context of what are the things that are important to you, you find out that yes, pricing is important, but it's not the most overriding factor. So the way we like to look at pricing is to say it is a value, it's tied to value. It's not an absolute pricing that is the issue for the corporates. Now, if you take the retail segment, and I'm sure Bode had covered it, what is very important to that segment is the ATM and the quality of service at the ATM. So what we see is when there's a lot of frustration with the ATM, it actually impacts the way that customers rate the bank.
Because they want cash on the go, and
they want
can't
cash
get it,
on the
it's a
go.
problem.
Yes. And interestingly, if you look at our detailed results this year, in terms of, because we ask customers what's important to you. If you look at the details of retail, the ATM is actually the only factor that the importance rating has gone up. The rest of that, if you compare it to the previous year, you actually see that there's a slight decline. But for the ATM, it actually has gone up. And, it's clear if you tie it to the other results we have, where 55% of people are saying, I actually use the ATM on a weekly basis. Only 33% are saying they use the branch on a weekly basis, that the ATM is extremely important from a retail perspective. So, back to your question, depending on the service we have at an ATM, it can become a big negative factor for banks.
Now, but let me ask you this as we round up. Do banks take this service seriously. I mean, obviously, it's all about them, and of course, they're there for the customers, even though they're there to make money, but customers help them achieve that. Do they take it seriously? Is it something, do you give it to the banks? Do they get a look at it, and do they use that to perhaps, improve on their services?
Okay. Yes, I think they've come to take it seriously. Like I told you, we started with corporates, second year, third year, and what we do is we actually publish the top 10 results in the papers, and apart from that, we do a publication that really goes deep into some of the insights behind, the results. And like I told you, they are in 5 areas: customer care. So even like Bisi said, she's told you some of the results, and we're saying this is what the customers are saying about customer care, but this is why they are saying this is the issue. These are the key things that we think you need to fix from an advisory perspective. So we're looking at things like transaction method and systems. What are the key things that are behind these things? So we do a publication. And after that, we do a drill down for banks, and we're able to tell them what are the key things that you need to focus on based on the results that are coming out of the survey. So we actually go back to the banks, tell them what they need to do better, and these are some of the. And when you're presenting, you actually get the nod around the room to know that yes, you're talking to some of the issues that we are even aware of in terms of the issues that we've.
Okay, Vita, let me ask you finally. Now, for this year, you did 14,000 retail customers, 3,000 SMEs, and over 400 corporates. And you actually added some new locations today, even as far as the northern part of the country. Any plans to expand, perhaps for 2014, to get further? I brought up the issue of credibility with her. Sure. Some people might ask, how credible is this? Can we use it? Can the CBN use it? Should the banks take it seriously?
Sure. I think I'd just like to add to what Bode has said. What we do find out is that the banks actually take it very seriously. They use it as a measurement, and also from the details that we're able to gather, it actually provides some deep insight into what's important to the customers and also how the customers perceive the bank services. So I think there's a lot of detail that is important in terms of what they do. Now, in terms of expanding, what we have done over the years is we've always expanded what we're doing and expanded so that we can provide more depth. So I can imagine that for next year, we probably will expand the retail sector. For next year, with the SMEs, there may be a bit more detailed analysis that we'll provide. So if you look at this year, for instance, yes, we've done 14 cities, but we probably we'll cover some additional cities next year.
Okay, thank you so much, ladies. Pleasure having you here today. Very insightful analysis into that report. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, and good luck with that next report. And of course, we'll be keeping our eyes on that and have you back here to give us more interesting findings from that report. Thank you so much. I've been talking to Bode Abifaren, Senior Manager at KPMG. I've also been talking to Bisi Lamikora, Partner and Head Management Consultant, also at KPMG. KPMG is an audit tax advisory firm, and they did the 2013 Bank Customer Satisfaction Survey, where they tried to just gauge the sentiment of bank customers, how they feel towards the banks. They were categorized into retail, SMEs, and of course the corporate and commercial companies. So that's what we've been looking at today. That's been our package. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Channels News Track is at 11. I'm Esther Oboda.